In today's video, we have some NHL trade rumor updates regarding the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the goalie trade market like the Anaheim Ducks, Winnipeg Jets, and Boston Bruins. Lots of information today on a few arbitration cases, including Trent Frederic, Jack McBain, as well as Jeremy Swayman. We also have an update on Leafs prospect Rodion and Amirov, as well as another update regarding the NHLPA and some of the current initiatives with Director Marty Walsh, as well as an update on the Flyers goalie prospect in Russia, Ivan Fedotov. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of different types of news to talk about here today, including a few trade scenarios we want to take a look at and get some updates. But first, we have some updates from the NHL world of RFAs, some arbitration cases. First up, we had two cases that were heading to arbitration today. One was settled right before the hearing was supposed to get underway, with the Arizona Coyotes coming to terms with forward Jack McBain on a 2-year contract. Now, the initial reports by Elliotte Friedman was it was 2 years at $1.6 million, and that ended up being different, which was kind of really odd after he later confirmed it's 2 years at $1.599999. That dollar really made a huge difference. I don't understand why they would do that. There's got to be some kind of weird rationale behind it. What it is, I don't know. It's not exactly meeting in the middle for the Coyotes and McBain. I think it's a slight win for the team. The team had filed at $1.2 million. The player was at $2.25 million. So that's, about $1 million difference. It's $400,000 basically more than the team had originally offered. So it's just shy of meeting in the middle. So a slight edge there towards the numbers that the team had submitted. Either way, they get a contract completed, and McBain and the Coyotes avoid their arbitration hearing. Now, as of right now, it looks like the Boston Bruins are heading to arbitration on multiple cases, and one of them took place today. Goaltender Jeremy Swayman and the Boston Bruins did not avoid salary arbitration. They had to go forth with their hearing here today. Swayman was looking for a $4.8 million contract. The team was only offering around $2 million. So that's a huge gap. Now, I suspect, like I talked about before the other day, the Ilya Samsonov contract, which was also settled very recently in the past week here through salary arbitration as well, he got 3.55. So I think it's fair to say with Swayman's numbers and what he played and everything, he's going to get a similar contract. Now, his numbers were a little bit better than Samsonov. He's a little bit younger, a little bit lighter workload, so I think it's going to be close. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets a smidge more, to be honest. Instead of 3.55, maybe he gets 3.75, 3.6. It's going to be pretty close to the Samsonov deal. I don't think it's going to be less, but it's going to be in that neighborhood. So that hearing went forth today. We should have the results within 48 hours. So we should have by Tuesday afternoon a decision rendered on what Swayman's been awarded for his arbitration results. The Boston Bruins and Trent Frederic are also very close to heading to their arbitration case as well. Their numbers have been filed now, so we know what each side's looking for. We'll see if they can settle ahead of time or if they'll have their hearing here very shortly as well. But Trent Frederic is looking for a contract in the vicinity of $2.9 million. The team was offering a 2-year deal at $1.4 million. So that's a big gap, just like Swayman. The Swayman are, over $2.5 million apart, and in Frederic's case, they're $1.5 million apart. Obviously, trying to save as much money as they can. They don't have a ton of space. I believe they have just over $5 million in salary cap availability, a little bit more than $5. So they should be able to be salary cap compliant, theoretically, after these two contracts are settled. And they will be settled this week. We do know that for sure. If Frederic and the Bruins come to terms the next day or so before the hearing goes for him, great. If not, they'll have a contract within 48 hours. So later in the week, we're looking at Wednesday, Thursday probably for his results. So we should know soon enough. But there's a good possibility here. Like I said, with Swayman getting in the 3.5, 3.6 range is probably reasonable. And Frederic, if if they're $1.5 million apart, you're probably looking at settling probably closer to 2 or a little over 2 million would be what I would suspect. He did score 17 goals last year and have a bit of a breakout season. Obviously, with all the departures, he could play a bigger role maybe this year. It's going to be tough, I think, for him to sustain that level of offense, but it could happen. We'll have to see. Obviously, the more term he can get, the better, you would think. Because I'd be a little skeptical of him, wanting to go and duplicate that. But we'll see what he can do. They can probably get both players signed right around between 5 and 5.5, and depending on the numbers, and have a little bit of cap space to spare. We could still maybe see a cost-cutting move out of the Bruins, and we're actually going to talk about them a little bit here at the towards the end of the video, and some of the trade stuff that's going around the league as well. So that's all your latest updates here on arbitration, some RFA news, some other news from other players around the league, including some prospects and some other players. We have news that Dylan Ferguson, who was originally a Vegas Golden Knights draft pick, he was drafted their first year in 2018, ended up making an NHL appearance, getting called up from junior hockey because of all the injuries their goalie suffered that year. Of course, since then, he's been mostly playing in the minor leagues. He did get a chance with the Ottawa Senators earlier this year because of all the injuries they had, but he hasn't really had sustained, NHL consistent time. He's opted to sign over in the KHL. So he's heading over to Russia to play and won't be in North America for the coming season. We also have an update today as well on Leafs prospect Rodion Amirov. Of course, the former first-round pick has been dealing with some complicated health issues after being diagnosed with a brain tumor some time ago. He did not play hockey this past season. Some updates from his KHL team, because he was signed, I believe, to another one-year contract with the KHL team, and his general manager over there said that he continues to go through treatment and that things are trending in a positive direction. Obviously, they give him the contract with the hopes that he'll be able to play this year. Doesn't sound like there's anywhere near a guarantee that he's going to, but at least they're feeling more optimistic. He acknowledged he's a really good player and makes a huge difference if they can play for the team or not. They're a much better team with him on the ice, but we will see. Of course, at this point, it's difficult to say if he'll ever be able to join the Leafs because we don't know his long-term future in hockey, period. But at least things are trending in a positive direction. It's the first update I've seen on Amirov in some time. I think there was one near the beginning of last season. I believe he was in Toronto for a brief period of time to be with the Leafs, and obviously had lots of support there, and has been back in Russia here for a while. So obviously that's good, optimistic news, but hopefully for his sake, he is able to resume his career at some point. But like I said, difficult to say with any kind of certainty right now. A couple of updates out of Philadelphia as well. We had an update that apparently this was actually announced about a week to week and a half ago, but I had not seen the news. But apparently it had been announced that the IIHF is reviewing the situation with Flyers goalie prospect Ivan Fedotov. Of course, we know over a year ago, last offseason, he was signed to a contract to come to Philadelphia and be hopefully part of their goaltending tandem, or at least play with the organization in North America. And he ended up not coming and was remanded to stay in Russia due to not fulfilling military service. Obviously, he was over there all year, and then after the mandatory military service that he had to stay in complete, he was then signed to a contract with CSKA in the KHL. And it's like they weren't going to let him go, even though he put the work in and fulfilled his obligations that they said he had to do. They still were signing him to a contract. So the NHL and the Flyers have kind of disputed the fact that he already had an existing NHL contract, and that contract should supersede any additional contracts he signed in Russia since then. Obviously, at this point, it's difficult to say how the ruling is going to go. We do know that many of the higher-ups of the IIHF are very pro-Russian, so I know they've had to impose a lot of sanctions on the Russian players and not allow them to participate in tournaments because of everything going on over there. But there is a lot of connections there, so it's hard to say how it's going to go. The player has basically said that whatever is decided, he'll play with whatever team he's told that his contract is valid with. Darren Dreger was reporting as well from TSN that the NHL and the Flyers have submitted part of their review on their side of it, thing saying that his contract should be told based on missing last season, because he was already signed last year and had to miss the entire season. So that contract's still valid, and that's kind of their argument here. Now, obviously, from the NHL sake, they allowed that contract to slide. So we'll see here what we can find out soon enough if Fedotov is going to be available to the Flyers this year or if he's going to be forced to stay in Russia. But I don't see how the Flyers can lose, and it can be determined that he plays in Russia, because he was obviously signed in Philly well ahead, but you just never know with some of these sketchy situations dealing with this international type stuff. So we'll have to see how that works out. And the other news out of Philadelphia, there's been some rumblings lately that obviously we already knew that Cutter Gauthier, their top prospect and first selection in last year's NHL draft, who looks to be a real solid future NHL player, did not attend Flyers development camp recently, and there's been some recent rumblings that the Flyers team organization were not thrilled about that, and we've now since learned that essentially he made the choice not to go, feeling like he needed a break and that he had played more than too much hockey in the past year or so and just wanted some time to have a break and be with family and friends and have just a little bit more of his off-season to himself. Apparently, Flyers brass were not thrilled with his decision. Obviously, they understood, and it doesn't really mean anything per se with the future of Gauthier and the Flyers organization. I believe at this point, everybody still is expecting and is confident that when he leaves college that he will indeed sign with the Flyers. If he didn't and was going to stay in college and either demand a trade or become a UFA, that would be a huge blow, because he was a high pick for them and is expected to be a real good future player. But there's no reason to think that he won't sign with the Philadelphia Flyers at any point in time, but it is kind of being acknowledged that Daniel Briere and Flyers brass were not thrilled with his decision. But at the same time, hockey's become a 12-month of the year calendar sport, and some of these young players have been at every showcase, every tournament, been asked. Like, eventually, you have to consider potential burnout and let them have a few extra weeks off in the offseason. To me, I don't see a big deal about it. I understand the importance of attending development camp, but look at what his body of work here. I don't think you have any reason to be too concerned. Also out of ESPN, Greg Wyshynski interviewed NHLPA new director Marty Walsh recently, asking about some of their initiatives that's been going on. And one of the big things that Marty Walsh mentioned, which is certainly a valid concern, I think will definitely be a hot topic if it's not addressed sooner, especially when it comes time for a new CBA in a few years. But the concern on the disproportionate amount of growth when it comes to team values compared to the growth of player salaries. And that's a tremendous concern, and I absolutely understand it. If you take a look at since the year 2000, like in the last 20 to 23 years, the average team value has increased over like 550%. It's ridiculous. Team values have gone through the roof. Back in 2000, an average team was around 180 million. Now you have many of the NHL teams valued at $1 billion or more. Now, to take a look at player salaries, the highest player salary back in the year 2000 was $10 million. You don't really have that many NHL players making $10 million now. Like, there are some, and the highest paid players are making a little bit more than that, but it's not really, like, it's minimal. The average player is not making a whole lot more money than they were then. And just like anybody else, yes, we may not hear the complaints as much because of the fact that they're making such a high wage compared to an average everyday Joe. But at the same time, like, it's huge. If you think about how much more life costs now than 20 years ago, it's substantial. And the fact that they're not really making any more money, but yet the owners' wealth has gone up exponentially because of the values. And then look at some of the franchises that have changed hands. Like, some of these guys have cashed out big time. So that's a major concern. He also addressed the fact that, some of these top players are not making anything near some of the top players in other sports. Like when you see some of these baseball and basketball and football players, even now I know, and there's been a recent example in soccer in Saudi Arabia getting paid like over $700 million or something stupid. But even looking at like the other top sports in North America, and some of these guys making, $30-40 million. Like some of these guys can be average in other sports and making way more than the top guys in hockey. Now I understand it's all revenue based, but considering the league values and the league revenue, and I understand the whole, cap thing and everything that they've been through in the last number of years with the escrow getting paid back and all that, but something's got to give here. We need to see, in my opinion, a real big jump in salary cap in the next few years, and it's totally justified based on this knowledge and these numbers. They also discussed the fact that it's still a major priority to make sure NHL players attend the 2026 Olympics, and they're still trying to figure out getting a World Cup of Hockey done ahead of time, hopefully at least 1 year ahead in 2025. But the problem is, of course, is that right now they couldn't involve the Russian players, and they're trying to figure out if there is a way they can involve them. Like I've seen, like in past situations involving Russia with sanctions and whatnot, like Russian athletes have been allowed to compete, but they technically weren't representing Russia. They have different ways they've gone about it before, so they're trying to be creative and figure out a way to make sure that those players can be involved so that they really do have the best in the world in the tournament, but not necessarily have it so that they're representing Russia and all that. It's complicated because of the political climate around the world, but they're trying to figure out a way around that so that those players can participate. Now, I want to take a look at some of the NHL goaltenders that have been under trade rumor mill really since the offseason began and even before and have not moved. Like, you have to question, did some of these teams really overestimate the goalie market? Lots of rumors suggesting that Connor Hellebuyck and John Gibson especially were going to be traded for sure. Like many NHL insiders considered it pretty much a slam dunk that these guys were not going to be starting next season with their current clubs. Connor Hellebuyck is a pending UFA and has made it clear that he's not going to sign an extension with the Winnipeg Jets. So, yes, his time and days in Winnipeg are numbered. Could they start the season with them in their lineup? It sure looks that way possibly now, unless things change. Same goes for John Gibson. Now, John Gibson comes with term. It's not the same scenario at all, but he's made it clear to the Ducks that he would really want a change of scenery and wants more of a chance to win as he's getting later into his career. And, just kind of getting tired of all the losing. Wants to get into a situation where he has a shot at getting into the playoffs and having some resemblance of the opportunity to play for a Stanley Cup instead of being on a rebuilding team, which he's been on for quite some time now. Obviously, understandable. It can be frustrating after all those years of losing. Obviously, those GMs of those teams, though, I think might have been asking for way too much of a return, which is causing the deals to not take place. Now, in the case of Hellebuyck, I think the thing that's scaring off teams is his next contract, because it's rumored that he wants over $9 million, somewhere in Andrei Vasilevsky money, which teams are reluctant to want to pay, even though he's a really good goaltender. A lot of teams, just don't have the space, or they've seen that you don't necessarily need a $9-10 million goaltender to win. I mean, yes, you've seen some of those high paying goaltenders like Carey Price, who's obviously not playing anymore, but recently go to a Stanley Cup final. Sergei Bobrovsky go to a Stanley Cup final. Vasilevsky's won a couple Stanley Cups. So clearly, it's not the end of the world, and it's not necessarily nothing to have a high-end goaltender playing for you, making big bucks. It can certainly go a long way to making you a better team. But we've also seen good examples of the Avalanche with Darcy Kuemper, the Golden Knights with Adin Hill, that you can get by with less than all-star goaltending and win the cup, and you don't need to be paying a fortune for goaltending. So there's almost a difference of a philosophy out there, and some of these teams that would be interested in having these guys, they want the player, they just don't want to pay the price. When it comes to the other one here I want to mention is Linus Ullmark. I honestly think the Bruins really did consider, there's lots of speculation that they were going to break up their goalie tandem of Ullmark and Swayman, and that they were going to likely move Ullmark and hand over the starting job to Swayman. kind of sell high on Ullmark, especially if they knew that Bergeron and Krejci weren't coming back. The team might have to take a little bit of a different approach, and they'd still have good goaltending in Swayman, but they could use the goaltender of Linus Ullmark to be a trade asset to accomplish other things and to get other players that they need. Like I mentioned before, trading Ullmark, like for example, like even Ullmark and Hellebuyck might make good trade guys to go for each other. Like the Bruins could use Hellebuyck for the 1 year and also get a guy like Mark Scheifele. It'd have to be a package deal. And it may not be a perfect trade, but like Ullmark to Winnipeg needs a new long-term goaltender, right? And maybe they move Scheifele to the Bruins. Like, Hellebuyck doesn't necessarily have to be involved there because obviously they got Swayman, but that's a potential deal. And obviously the Jets can't pull it off a trade like that without moving Hellebuyck. If he doesn't go to Boston, he has to go to somewhere else. There was rumored to be other teams involved, but it's just a lot. So obviously the GMs are going to have to come down on their asking prices, especially with a guy like Gibson, who's been pretty agreeable to the situation considering all things. But we have different scenarios here. You have Gibson who wants a trade. You have Hellebuyck who doesn't want to re-sign. He's going to be a pending UFA. And then you've got Linus Ullmark who probably doesn't really want to leave Boston, but a team that's going in a new direction and having to change things up because of the lack of center depth they certainly find themselves with after Krejci and Bergeron likely not returning here. So completely different scenarios, but I can see a scenario evolving in Boston where they do move Ullmark for a top center. That would be one of the best ways they could do it from a cap perspective, because after signing Swayman and Frederic, as we mentioned earlier, they're really not going to have any cap space left. They can't add money without trading money out. So it's just that simple. But you have to think that some of these GMs have completely overestimated the goalie market, which is why we haven't seen some of these big names move as of yet. And I do suspect that they've figured that out by now. They obviously know that if the price doesn't change, they're not going to get a trade. And I wonder as we get closer into August and with a lot of this other business taken care of and closer to training camp, if we might see somebody finally budge and maybe get a move or two done. We'll have to see. The other news on the Leafs comes from Nick Kypreos, who's recently talking about their salary cap situation and the fact that obviously we know they're over the cap. Having Matt Murray. He talked about Murray's situation essentially, which I still really question the whole process here, because he said it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that Murray was deemed healthy in the playoffs and now he's not. And then essentially, Murray was due $8 million this year for his actual salary. It was a backloaded contract that he signed with the Senators after being acquired from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the salary was going up each year, and $8 million is what he was being due to be paid this year. So getting to be bought out now, he would have lost a bigger chunk of money than a lot of people realize. So obviously, by going the LTIR route, they get to bury the full contract, which is best for the Leafs, rather than do a buyout and have some dead money, or to do a trade and have to retain some money, or if they need to do a trade and for a team to take the whole asset and the whole contract, that they have to give a sweetener, right? Either way, that's clearly the best route for the Leafs, is for him to go in LTIR. And then, of course, it's best for him if he either plays or goes on LTIR and not be bought out, because then he loses a bunch of money, where he's getting $8 million salary this coming season. So ultimately, like Kypreos was saying, it's a best case scenario for both the player and the team. And clearly they must have the medical stuff to back this up, at least because the NHL does supposedly look into these cases. And I would think where he was deemed healthy in the playoffs, that they would scrutinize it and make sure that it's on the up and up. Obviously, Kypreos went on to also say that because of that, obviously it alleviates the fact that they don't have to do anything too drastic to get their salary cap in order. But he did wonder if a TJ Brodie trade might be more likely, because their buyout window, now that they would have got with the Samsonov Arb case being finalized, has come and gone. They're not going to be doing a buyout here in this second window. It's closed. The Samsonov contract came last Sunday. It opens 48 hours later and lasts for 3 days. So they would have had Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to complete a buyout. And that's gone now. We're on to Sunday. So clearly that's not happening. So the only way they're going to be able to get cap compliant is by moving money out or demoting money. And if they could choose not to trade anybody, get the training camp, put some players on waivers. But then they're risking maybe losing them for nothing, maybe having a bunch of dead money in the minors, which they probably don't care about. And they could go about things that way, but it's not really ideal. What Kypreos suggested that they might try to do is to maybe trade Brodie and now, because he's got 1 year at $5 million. And to be honest, like I said before, you got to be careful about moving him, because even though he might not have been the best in the playoffs, he wasn't the worst, and he had a good regular season. So are you going to be able to upgrade on that? And that's the tough part. But he said maybe it's time they move Brodie and see if they can find a bigger, younger defenseman who maybe can grow with the team, and they can kind of start to reshape that back end now. And at the same time, get more cap compliant, because they could save the $2 million. They could still have room to sign or have a new defenseman come in if they traded him for around $3 million and get a different looking back end. But I caution, again, I don't know that that's the best thing for the Leafs. I don't think TJ Brodie was that bad. I don't know that they can bring in a $3 million defenseman and actually get better. I'm not sure that it's possible. The only way it's possible is if they get lucky and they get a $3 million younger defenseman who can't request more money or is signed to that because he's not established enough, but ultimately plays better than expected. And you're gambling. You're very much gambling for sure. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to do. At the same time, though, something has to give. Money has to go. We've talked at great length over the Nylander situation, and as much as I think that could solve a lot of issues for them, I'm not convinced they're gonna do it, and I'm not convinced at this point, at least, that's going to happen anytime soon. If they do trade Nylander, I think we're looking at much closer to either training camp or into the season. If negotiations are absolutely going horrendously bad, but we'll have to wait and see. Either way, is TJ Brodie trade the answer? We know a buyout's not coming now, or are they going to wait and place players on waivers and demote guys that they want to cut off the main roster? And do things that way. But based on the cap, they don't have a lot of options that way. It's not like it used to be. And they certainly have players that are waivers exempt, but not players that they would really want to have in the minors. So let me know what you think they're going to do, as well as all the other news here in today's video. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.